I'm not sure who got beat up worse last night, the Mississippi State Bulldogs or Mary Kate Cornett on Twitter.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA Radio Network's Luke Robinson. That's me. Internet Alabama legend Jimmy Stein. That's him. We still need a better intro, but that's what we're rolling with right now. That's him, Jimmy Stein, right here.
I don't know that I want to be an internet legend on the heels of Mary Kate Cornett. So,
true.
I mean, maybe I do. I mean, she's quite the valuable meme coin, which I need to spend 2 hours researching today because I really don't know what that stuff means.
If you are unfamiliar with that story, do yourself a favor. Do not look it up.
Or if you do look it up, clear about 4 hours on your schedule.
There's a lot to unpack. It's a therapist's dream. But Jimmy, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Thank you, everydayers, for being here every day. Thank you, newbies, for being here today. And thank all of you for making this your first listen every day. But speaking of animal abuse, which we kind of weren't, Alabama beat up on Mississippi State last night. And I mean, just pummeled the poor Bulldogs. I mean, I really don't have anything against Mississippi State at all. But I think Nate Oates does. He's undefeated against Chris Jans.
Chris Youngblood does.
Chris Youngblood hates dogs. That's the only thing I know for sure. And my goodness gracious, when Alabama plays like that, they can and will beat anybody. The thing is, they won't play like that every time. So really, it's kind of silly to even say that. They can't play that well every game. They just can't. But what they were doing last night was poetry in motion.
Best combination of offense and defense all year, I think. You know, scoring was sort of spread out. Now, I know people say, well, no, look at Youngblood, look at Sears, especially Youngblood, 7 of 11, I think, from three-point shooting. But everyone chipped in. Everyone scored. Everyone chipped in. And defensively, they played great. Special shout-out to LeBaron Philon. You know, if you're going to beat Mississippi State, you got to make sure Hubbard doesn't score 40. And Philon guarded Hubbard and was fantastic. I think Philon may have earned himself some NBA stock last night on the other side of the court. That just a spectacular performance. And frankly, I want to say the poster child for the win was Chris Youngblood, who was just phenomenal with his shooting. But I want to give a special shout out to Grant Nelson because Grant is not playing well in terms of scoring the basketball. I watched him pass up numerous three-point opportunities. He did that for a stretch last year too, where all of a sudden he just wouldn't take a three because his confidence was so shot. So he's not scoring. He's passing up threes. But you know what he's doing? He's the reason we're winning the games. And as exemplified by his Hard Hat Award, Grant plays hard. He does all of the little dirty things it takes to win the game. And if we need a player to dive on the floor and skin up his elbows and knees to get a loose ball, I want it to be Grant because he's going to go get it. And I just think his effort last night, I think, made me more proud of even Youngblood and Mark Sears shooting.
And speaking of doing the dirty little things, I'm going to implore you once again to not look up Mary Kate Cornett on the internet in that whole situation. But going back to Grant Nelson here for a second, I think that's a great place to start. It may be a weird place to start for some people because when you think about Chris Youngblood, oh, it's pretty. It's so pretty. If you've seen White Man Can't Jump and Wesley Snipes' character, then that was kind of Chris Youngblood last night. I mean, he was just stroking it. But he was fantastic. And it was beautiful to watch. And I'll tell you something else, by the way. It's a weird way for me to start off with Grant Nelson and spend 5 minutes on Chris Youngblood. But the other night, I was speaking to somebody that's moderately close to the program. And he said, you know, of all the people on the team, you'd think, okay, I don't know why guys do this, but they're like, all right, who would I not like to fight over there? I mean, the answer for me is all of them.
Yeah.
All of them, anytime ever. But the answer for this guy, who was a big dude, he was like, the one guy you don't want to mess with is Chris Youngblood. That's the one guy. Now, you know, of course, I mean, Aiden Sherrill and, you know, Cliff Amore, the big hulking dudes, yeah, they'd probably beat you up pretty good too. But he's like, in the end, it's like Chris Youngblood when he says, quit playing with me, quit playing with him. So,
there's always
anyway.
one basketball player that can like match up with the football players for
Yep.
like, there's always one that's like, hey, that's the one, even the football players. Hey, that's the one basketball player. Don't go mess with him. That's no doubt Chris Youngblood. And I think it gets back to that leadership, but he's also a great guy. I think if you heard him on interviews, he's great. And Nate Oates has spoken so highly of Chris Youngblood as a person since the day he showed up, as a person, not as a basketball player. I hope Chris Youngblood goes into coaching because I think he's got that toughness, the toughness and intelligence and the leadership scream coach to me. But we'll see.
I'm with you. And okay, so going back to Grant Nelson, like we were talking about,
Yeah.
Grant Nelson, I'm like you. He passed up a lot of shots, which I think showed leadership in its own right. I think Grant knows he's not himself right now, whether it's due mentally, physically, both, whatever. Grant's not himself right this minute, but he had some nice dunks again last night, 2 big, powerful dunks that I remember specifically. And he's doing enough. He's trying. He's trying. And I think that's what a team is all about. You got to be able to pick up a teammate when they're not 100%, whatever the reason is. And I don't know that Grant Nelson's 60% right now. I swear, Jimmy. I mean, he's a better player than his stats are showing.
He's the type player that's going to be banged up all the time because he plays so hard. So those guys do get banged up because they're at it, you know, throwing elbows on every other every other possession. He went through this last year. I remember it being right before the NCAA tournament where all of a sudden it was like, boy, you can't really depend on him to make a three or make a basket. And then the NCAA tournament started and he was a different kid. Obviously,
wonder,
that last win that he had physically.
I wonder if that's because the NCAA tournament maybe called a little bit different. The SEC is so physical. Maybe the NCAA tournament is called a little differently. And so when he has a little more freedom, you know, and it's not quite as like get an elbow to the jaw every time you do anything. Last night, I thought he got a charge call on him. I remember, I think it was in the first half. And I was like, how do you even call that a charge? I mean, the whole point of calling a charge.
That was a terrible call. I know exactly.
The whole point of calling a charge is to stop, to make sure the offense player doesn't hurt somebody like almost purposefully.
Yeah, Jimmy Dykes even pointed out that's not a good call.
That was a terrible call. And, you know, and he hit the deck. And if you remember, he grabbed his arm and I was like, oh, no, don't be really hurt. You know, he's okay to be banged up, but don't be hurt. And so anyway, I thought, you know, Aiden Holloway, he's still doing his thing. He is water bugging through defenses and then finding the open man. Mark Sears, obviously on another planet right this minute. Cliff Amore's playing a lot better. Aiden Sherrill, he's kicking butt right now. Mo Diabate is just here's the problem. It sounds like we're not talking about Mo Diabate enough because see, Mo Diabate, he doesn't have a variance in his game. His game is really strong and pretty doggone strong. And that's where he falls every single time. He doesn't fall like Mo Diabate's never going to lead the team with 28 points or anything like that. But he's going to always get somewhere around 10 to 14 points and always get around somewhere to 7 to 12 rebounds. And he's also going to play incredible defense. And he's also going to make a play that doesn't show up on the stat sheet that you like, oh my God, only Mo Diabate can do that.
It's because that's a great point. It's because if you depend on your shooting, sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. But Mo depends on effort. And it's always there. It's always there. Mo's an effort player, and the effort stays the same every game in and every game out. So you know what you're getting from him, and it's just invaluable. And again, I predict that should he stick around for 4 years at Alabama, I think in his senior year he's going to become a good scorer. Not like 30 points, but I'm talking about a quality scorer in his.
Where have we seen this before?
Herbert Jones comes to mind.
Yeah.
Keith Askins, too, by the way, who always compared, for you old hats, always compared Herb Jones to Keith Askins. I found them very similar as players. I think Herb ended up being an even better player than Askins, but they were similar. And I think Diabate is in that ballpark, not carbon copies by any mean, but in that ballpark. And I think he's going to develop in that way, and that they did, because no one talked about Herb or Keith Askins as NBA players early in their careers. It only sort of came about in their senior year and then continued in the NBA, because their improvement continued even as they got into their 20s.
Yeah, Keith Askins played the NBA for a long time, and then he coached the NBA a long time for the Heat, if I remember. And I probably coached for some other teams. I just remember him for the Heat.
And Herb could do the same thing. Herb's dad's a coach, and Herb would be a spectacular coach. Who would have thought that would be the theme of today's show? Let's talk about Alabama basketball players who might be coaches one day.
Let's talk about FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to get a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay or something like that. It's cool. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of, tell them, Jimmy.
The NBA.
Yay, you got it right again.
Did you mute yourself during the mini break? We get like a 2-second break.
Yes, I did. I don't know why, too. And I even remember, it's just like muscle. Oh, it's so stupid. All right. Shout out to Mike, who I saw last night at the BJCC Legacy Arena. I'm calling games for the AHSA. And I'm walking back to the media area for a second, and this guy says, "Locked on Bama." And I said, "Hey," and he said, "Mike." I said, "No, it's Luke." He said, "No, I'm Mike." And I was like, "Oh." That's like you muted yourself. That's like the verbal interaction equivalent of me muting myself.
You could have gone, "Oh, what a cool new name for me. I'm going to start going by Mike."
I was like, "Yeah, not such a big fan after all, are you?" My name's Luke, dude. But anyway, so AHSA games been very cool. I'm going to tell you something. I'll probably talk about players and from this tournament later on. I'm going back today to call a few games, then I'll be there Saturday for the championships. And the names do begin to run together, and I didn't call this game, so bear with me. But Montgomery Academy has a dude who is a sophomore, who is a dude's dude. Now, I've looked him up on 24/7 and on 3. He's listed as I think like a tight end or an athlete or something in football, but the dude can hoop. Montgomery Academy's got hoopers. I mean, serious downtown, not messing around hoopers. And they're going to be
is this a skill position type kid?
He's bigger than that, and he's got a beautiful jump shot. He's just an effort guy, too. I was super impressed. Only a sophomore and got the body of like a college junior. I was like, okay, I don't know what he's going to play, but he's going to play something. I mean, it hadn't all rounded into form just yet. Like, I don't know if he's going to be basketball or football. And I'll talk about him later because, frankly, honest to God, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head because I called 4 games yesterday. And if you do play-by-play for 4 games, you forget everybody's name by the time it's all over. So
it happens sometimes. You watch more high school basketball than I do, but it has happened to me sometimes. You watch high school basketball, every now and then you see a kid and you're like, that is a good football. I bet that he's a real good football player. Well,
I did call the Jackson game, and they, of course, have Landon Duckworth, who was committed to South Carolina. He's not anymore. And he's a good basketball player. You would not want to play basketball against him like in pickup. He would dominate. In a game like this, it's a little more structured where, the defense is a little bit more complicated and know, where everybody's going to be. Duckworth didn't do a lot. Keon Chapman, that guy's got some hops, bro.
He's going to play in the SEC as a football player. I like him a lot as a football player. Now, he is not on the Alabama radar. I think his nickname is Red. I think he goes by Red Chapman.
That's right.
he doesn't. But he is to me the quintessential guy that signs with Ole Miss that ends up being pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably headed to the SEC. I think watching him play, a little thin, but obviously that can change. But man, real athletic.
Got a Derunya Wilson vibe about him.
Oh, I like that.
He does.
Played a wide receiver at Mississippi State.
Yeah, and Derunya Wilson was on the basketball team with Justin Coleman and Winona years ago, where they just and they had a guy named either Isaiah or Isaac something else. It was like a 7-footer that went and played at South Alabama. That was really good.
Hey, this is good.
But let's talk about the SEC race here for a second.
I was going to say real quickly, this is an Alabama football related thing, actually. Speaking of that, I assume Juice Gordon was on that Jackson team you saw. Is Juice Gordon playing?
You
remember seeing him? Jameer Gordon?
Boy, I swear, Jimmy, I didn't call his name. I was kind of looking for him, and then I just forgot about it because you get caught up in it. But I don't think he was on the team. I'll double check that.
There's been 2 in-state kids in this class that we're recruiting right now, the 26 class that everyone tunes in to hear about. There's been 2 in-state kids committed to Alabama, Juice Gordon from Jackson and Vodney Cleveland from Parker, that committed to Alabama and then decommitted. And then Alabama just stopped recruiting them. And let me tell you, everything is a case-by-case basis. Don't make a blanket rule. You can't say, okay, well, this staff, if you decommit, they're just not going to recruit you anymore. That's not necessarily true, because I assure you, if let's say EJ Crowell commits to Alabama, decommits, we're still going to recruit him. We're going to try until the last possible breath to sign that kid. But these other kids that are maybe not as high of a priority, I sort of like it. Saban famously to me was super patient with kids. Saban, something could happen on the recruiting trail and Saban would say, no, we're still recruiting that. But this staff seems to be more like, hey, once you tell us publicly now we don't want to play for you, forget it. That offer's gone. I like it myself.
I like it selectively. Because Ryan Williams decommitted.
Not to the Crowell, not to the Ryan Williams, not to Crowell. That's different. There's different rules. And see, it's life, isn't it? I mean, we all work with fellow employees. And some people will be treated differently. Why? Merit, contribution. Some people get to break rules. Maybe the rule is, hey, you can't play golf when we go on road trips on this baseball team. But if you've won a couple Cy Young awards, guess what? You can bring your golf club. You can play. That's the way life works, and that's the way recruiting's working in Alabama right now.
Well, now that we've sort of taken this whole segment on it, let's keep going with this, because it would be awesome if everybody were treated the exact same, and if everybody were held to the exact same standard of behavior or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, if you get the people who get in trouble that aren't as talented aren't going to be bailed out as much. And that is universal across nationalities, races, religions, creeds, sports. I mean, it's the same. Hockey people who are awesome, who get in trouble, they don't get in as much trouble as the hockey guy who's the backup goalie. That's the way it works. I mean, that's why you have a lot of folks. Draymond Green could get in trouble as much as he want to. Dennis Rodman got in his trouble as much as he want to. Charles Barkley back in the day got in some trouble, but they sort of work through it. It doesn't mean they're bad people, by the way. None of those folks I would call bad people.
The number one sales guy in your company, whoever's number one in sales, he can probably drink at lunch.
Yeah.
No one's going to say a thing. If you're last in sales and they catch you drinking at lunch, pack your bags. But that's just
you're last in sales and you're not drinking at lunch. You better bottoms up. You better do something different. I don't know what it is. You got to try something else.
Sports is supposed to be lessons in life for all these kids that are growing up and learning. And hey, that's one thing you learn. High achievers are held to are allowed certain things. But anyway, it is funny to me when you start talking about Jackson. I'm like, boy, at one point Alabama were like, we'll take Juice Gordon. Not now. And Juice, by the way, decommitted to Alabama to commit to Central Florida. And I don't believe he's committed to Central Florida now either. I
I
don't
think he
believe.
has to be committed from there too. Now, and Bodney Cleveland, by the way, a lot of people think he's going to end up at Florida right this minute. And Florida's a great program. They're one of the best programs in the country, no doubt about it. But I'm sort of like, okay. I mean, even if he's going to end up at Auburn, I'd be like, okay. I mean, Bodney Cleveland seems like a very good player, and I wish him well. I'm not mad at him at all. At the same time, I'm behind this staff. If Bodney Cleveland were, say, Jonathan Allen,
Right.
I'd be like, hey, Kalen, keep calling that man.
Right. Well, he's not a 5-star. I mean, that seems apparent. Grades are far from over. As we talk about the rankings process, it's still a process. But he's to me clearly, and I've watched the tape. He's not a 5-star. Is he good? Of course he's good. That's why Florida wants him. That's why at one point Alabama said, "Yeah, we'll take him." But again, not a 5-star, not even a top 100 player. But I think it's fair to rank him in the top 250. And y'all all know, everybody listens to the show knows what I think of top 250 players. Those are a blue chip. Like I said, to me, top 100, elite. Top 250 to 300, blue chippers. That's how I look at him. He's a blue chip type prospect. But elite, nah, not for me.
All right, we got to shoehorn a lot of stuff in here in this final segment, but I did want to bring up the SEC race because it is interesting that Florida lost at Georgia last night. Now, it doesn't reshape everything because Alabama still got to play Florida. If Alabama loses to Florida, that sort of, then Florida's got the tiebreaker. And Florida's schedule coming down the stretch is certainly easier than Alabama's. Even though Florida travels to Bama, they also welcome in Texas A&M. And then I can't believe they play somebody else. Maybe I can't remember who that is at the end, but it's nobody.
Every game in the SEC is losable.
They play Ole Miss at home. So they have 2 home games and then the road Bama game. We have 2 road games, and our 2 road games are 2 top 5 teams. One of them being the number 1 team in the country. And the other game is a home game against the number 2 team in the country. So, yeah, it's going to be tough. Now, I think Alabama is getting very close. Look, if we can beat Tennessee this weekend, and I'm going to be honest, I don't think we will, because I think what's going to happen is Tennessee is going to throw elbows and knees and torsos and collarbones and everything they can at us, and just get away with it. And I'm not preemptively bitching about the officiating. I'm just saying that's how they play. And when they play at their place, the officials tend to call it more how the home team wants it. That's universal. So I'm not saying that the refs are costing us a game already. I'm just saying they play a different style, and we're already kind of beat up. There's no telling if Darian Reed's going to be back. There's no telling if Grant Nelson's going to be healthy. So, yeah, I think Tennessee will probably win this game. That makes the Florida game very important. It also means, hey, I'd certainly love to see somebody like Texas A&M beat Florida too, and give us a little bit of a cushion.
And it could happen. I mean, I agree with Florida. With A&M coming in, I would say Florida's going to win. Florida with Ole Miss coming in, I would say Florida's going to win. But any SEC game is losable, because everyone is good, and we're playing for and winning the SEC championship is still mathematically possible for Alabama, and you do get to play Auburn at the end, and maybe you put yourself in a position where that game decides it, or at least you can tie them or whatever. But to me, I'm looking at seeding in the NCAA tournament as being even more important to me, and to some extent seeding in the SEC tournament. I think you'd like that double bye, not because the end-all be-all is winning the SEC tournament trophy, but the end-all be-all might be that rest, the rest that you get from the double bye. And I think Alabama fans learned last year how valuable rest could be, because I have this theory that Alabama losing early in the SEC tournament might have been what propelled their NCAA tournament success. Why? 2 reasons. Primarily, number 1, you got some extra rest because of the early loss, the Friday loss in the SEC tournament. That got you some extra rest. And secondly, provided some motivation that, hey, that's not how we want to be remembered. This year, I really value the rest. And when you're talking about, like Luke just said, playing 2 top 5 teams on the road to end the season, you're talking about a team that's going to really need some rest.
And all the teams we play coming down the stretch are very physical.
Yeah, Tennessee, I mean, again, start yelling at the officials now. Just get it out of your system. So Saturday, you don't spend all afternoon doing it
And
because
I don't mean to speak for Jimmy, but I think I want to be very clear here. There's a difference between this and what I heard some Auburn folks saying on the before the Alabama Auburn basketball game. Some folks were saying, "Oh, just be prepared that the officials are going to screw us." That's not what we're saying.
no,
We're saying Tennessee plays incredibly physical, and when you're at home, the home team usually dictates the state of play.
their
So,
style of play is going to amplify frustrations with officials.
and I think that here's the thing: if Alabama plays physical back, I think it'll be the same type of calls or non-calls or whatever. I don't think the officials are going to mess with us here. I think that what's going to happen is the style of play that will be allowed to be played in Tennessee will dictate that game. And I think Tennessee, they come out, they shoot with their elbows out like this horizontally. I mean, because they want you to run your chin into their elbows. And again, it's a style of play. It is Alabama's style has proven to be very effective. The shoot the threes and shoot bunnies. That's our style. And try to play defense when you can. Their style is play very, very, very intense defense, knock some people around, and see what happens. And it works for them too. So anyway, now having said that, Jimmy, really quickly talk about what Kalen DeBoer said with the spring game changes, because I was at the ACSA tournament and I didn't get to read all that. So I'd like to know myself.
Just basically saying that, that we will have 8A. Many teams now are canceling their spring games. It's a new thing. Nebraska, I would say, to some extent, started it. Now, Texas isn't going to have a spring game. Ole Miss didn't have one last year, so maybe you could say Ole Miss started it. Kalen DeBoer is saying, no, we're going to have a spring game, but it's going to be modified. I don't even know that they've landed on a format in terms of what it will look like. Some people are upset. I'm a little upset because I'm just like everybody else. I would like to see football, a football game. That's what I would like to see. But I think in this new landscape, most colleges aren't feeling like that benefits their program. Now, I'm also into football this much. I may be alone on this, but I would urge DeBoer, even though it might be just a Jimmy thing. Hey, I'm fine with this. Why don't you just do this? Why don't practice 15? Just practice. Do what you did the first 14 days of spring practice. Just do it in the stadium with people there. I enjoy. I've been to practice both as a booster and as a media member. Both. I enjoy the heck out of going to normal, everyday. This is what we do at practice type practice. I'm fine with that myself because I would enjoy it. Now, not everybody else would. Not everybody else wants to see defensive line drills. I do. I get that a lot of you don't. And yeah, would I rather see a game? Sure, it's more entertaining. But hey, is entertaining us most important or not getting injured? Not putting players on display that'll just be our backup player, or backup, not the starters, the backup players standing out on A-Day. Thus, they get the NILF offer in the mail the moment the portal opens. That stinks. And again, players getting hurt in a regular game, more likely in a game than in drills and practice. So all of those things added up, Luke, and I do think spring games as a whole are probably going the way of the dinosaur soon. I don't like it, but I get it.
Yeah, I get it. I don't like it. I also understand it. I'm just like you. I got a text last night. I won't even talk about the high schools or whatever, but y'all can probably put some pieces together. There was a kid that's transferring from one school to another school that, anyway, in high school. And I think all of us were in the same posture. Like some of us were glad that this kid is transferring to make this particular high school better. At the same time, we all understand, okay, by liking this, we are part of the problem. And so, yes, it is, but we also understand it's a reality. Like high school transfers. I heard something yesterday. Again, this is I'm not going to mention the school or mention anybody, but just trust me on this. My sources trust me, bro. But there's a high school in the state of Alabama, and a kid was on a recruiting visit there to transfer from his school. Now, it's not called a recruiting visit. It's not called that at all. but that's what it is. And this person told me about it, and he didn't go into any specifics. I don't know who the player's name was or anything like that. He just said, this is where we are. Like, this is where we are. And so when you say, man, I love A-Day and I love taking my kids, and, you know, it's either free or you pay $5 to get in and blah, 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 and it's easy. Yeah. But unfortunately, we've ruined that. Just like we've ruined a lot. And just like, I'll tell you something else. You know, there was a lot of talk last night about the SEC Big Ten ganging up with some of the ACC and Big 12 members and doing this super conference, which we all know is coming eventually. But the more it's talked about, the more real it seems. And then I started thinking, well, at first I was all for it because I'm tired of the Boise States crying that they don't get enough love or get enough respect or whatever. But then part of me was like, that's why I love college football, though, is because some weekends you do play, you know, a Southern Mississippi State A&M, and you get to just let the young guys play, and you get to take your kids, and it's not super expensive. And
part of my enjoyment of college football, Luke, a part of my enjoyment is that there's 135 teams with 135 different situations, as opposed to the SEC. I don't love college football because the SEC. The SEC is one of the main reasons I love college football, and I love that Alabama is part of the greatest conference in the sport. But I love college football because there's 134 programs, and I'm interested in what's going on at Louisiana Tech and Boise and San Jose State. I want to be interested in all of that, and not just Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, Oklahoma. I mean, but that's ultimately what it's turning into, is just the little NFL.
Yeah, and it's scary because you wonder how that's going to affect this thing that you and I love so much. That, honest to God, I mean, the podcast we love this podcast now, and it's doing great. We got a lot of subscribers, and we appreciate every single one of y'all. But see, Jimmy and I were doing this back when we called it Talking Tuscaloosa in 2016, 17, somewhere in there. And we were literally talking into the void. There would be times where we would cut a podcast, and I would tell Jimmy after an hour and a half, I forgot to hit record. And we'd do it again.
And then we would do it again.
We would do it again. That's sad and both, and also awesome in the sense that shows how much we love talking about this stuff. So how much is that going to change when we become baby NFL? That's scary to me because I've dedicated a lot of my life, rightly or wrongly, to following college football. So, Jimmy, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.